Hi, and welcome to Filmi Ladies. This is episode 4, and I am your host Pitu. I'm joined by my co-host and dear friend and fellow Filmi lady Beth. And today we're gonna start this kind of little series that we thought of, which is called Female Megastars of Yesteryears. We basically wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into some of the leading ladies of Indian cinema since, like the 50s, basically like black and white movies, all the way through to contemporary times. Part of the reason I think was because, and I think I speak for Beth along with myself, is that I don't think that either of us really have watched a ton of really old movies and don't have as good an idea of films from those eras as we do like more modern times. So we kind of wanted to explore those a little bit. And the format is going to be that, we pick a female megastar and then I pick a movie to review, she picks a movie to review, and then we just sort of talk about it. So the female superstar that we're going to talk about today is one of my favorites, and that is Nargis. Yay! So, Beth, tell me what you know about Nargis. How many movies of hers have you seen, and which movie are you going to talk about today?
So I think I've seen 5, so not very many, but the big ones. So I've seen Mother India, I've seen Barsat, I've seen Ugh, I've seen Shri 420, and then I think one other that I'm blanking on at the moment.
Avara, maybe?
Which one?
Avara?
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course. How can I forget that? There's several more that were already on my list to watch. I'll get to what I watched in a second. I feel like I know more about Nargis's life and sort of persona than I do of her films, really. And it's time to rectify that and actually watch the artist as an artist. I dug into the university library to get some scholarly knowledge about kind of Nargis's persona, which we can talk about later. But obviously we have to think about her with Raj Kapoor, without Raj Kapoor, as Mother India, and then after Mother India. I think those are, kind of the major points that seem to come up with her a lot. But if there's anyone watching, listening who doesn't know, she was a child artist. Her mother was a film singer, actor, producer, and director, which is phenomenal. Her grandmother was a courtesan, so she comes from a performance family. She comes from a mixed Hindu-Muslim family, which is also, I think, quite important to her star persona. She bridges partition, obviously, and she stopped acting very young. In my head, that I hadn't really quite pieced that together, so that was interesting. And of course, I feel like I've seen as many homages to her as I have seen of her actual work itself, more, for sure. So she's important. And the film that I chose to watch, I was going to go for her last major film, but then I couldn't find it with subtitles. So instead I went for what I understand to be her first major film, Taqdeer, which is a Mehboob Khan film. And as I talk about it, and I'll share some screen grabs on Instagram or something, he's experimenting with a few motifs that you will recognize if you have seen Mother India. Including Nargis with a sickle saying mother, mother, and you're like, okay, I got it. It is a doozy of a film, this one I picked. I didn't know anything about it, and it is wild, and I can't wait to talk about it more. But that's my kind of experience with Nargis in a nutshell. It's very limited, and I'm glad that we're doing this so I can learn some more.
Yeah. The movie I picked, because I'm a selfish person, I picked one of my favorite Nargis movies, which I've seen so many times. So I picked Chori Chori, and that is a 1956 movie starring, of course, Raj Kapoor. Has insanely good music. Like every single song in this movie is phenomenal. And a lot of people probably know Chori Chori because it is an adaptation of the Hollywood movie, which is It Happened One Night, that has Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable in it. And then I also knew that Dil Hai Ki Manta Nahi is also based on Chori Chori and It Happened One Night, but I didn't know that there was another movie. It's called No Deo Gyara, which was made exactly a year after Chori Chori was, but I haven't seen that one. And I actually am someone who grew up with Dil Hai Ki Manta Nahi because it's a 90s movie and also had spectacular music. And I've always liked it. But because I kind of recently saw Dil Hai Ki Manta Nahi and then I just watched Chori Chori again, it really drove home to me how phenomenal an actress Nargis is, because she was so amazing in this movie. And I didn't hate Pooja Bhatt in Dil Hai Ki Manta Nahi. I thought she was fine, but there's a difference between fine and phenomenal, and you can really tell when you watch this film. So
that movie is so interesting because I haven't seen it, but I have seen Suhana Safar, which is the Shashi Kapoor, Sharmila Tagore sort of riff on. And at some point, right, these movies are remaking the earlier Indian ones as opposed to It Happened One Night, right. I think. But there's also a Bengali one from the 50s with Uttam Kumar and Suchitra Sen, which I love. So I suspect that I would like Chori Chori very much, and I look forward to watching it after this. There are also
two South Indian versions of it, apparently, like I think the Telugu version and a Kannada version. I haven't seen those either.
Super popular source.
This script is popular. Like, they've remade it so many times apparently in India. I'm like, wow.
As far as I have been able to tell, and by no means do I know everything, it is the most remade film apart or source except from Devdas.
Oh yeah.
Because there are even more Devdases than there are It Happened One Nights, but at least in terms of a non-Indian source material, I think this is the most remade film in Indian history, which is really interesting.
Yeah. What is also interesting too, I was thinking about it, is that the plot is actually wafer thin, and the story really kind of transpires over like a week, maybe. I mean, the bulk of the story really. So it really is very performance dependent. It's not something where there's like a lot of subplots and twists and turns and interesting things happening. You kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. So it's so chemistry dependent. And that's one thing I think that makes Chori Chori stand out, and is the reason I've watched it so many times, is that the chemistry between Raj Kapoor and Nargis is undeniable. Now, I am not a Raj Kapoor fan. I've seen some of his older movies that I really liked. I like Shri Char Sabis, I like Avara. But then I've also seen so much dreck that he made and produced, especially in the later years. And he's so problematic in so many ways. I also don't think he's a particularly good actor because he is the original ham. I mean, I know how people go on and on about Shah Rukh being a ham, but like Raj Kapoor was the original ham.
And he's just so insistent on centering himself when there's much more, I think, more talented, more charismatic, more interesting people around him. And I'm not talking about, obviously he knows how to make a song sequence. No question. I don't really have particular issues with him as a director, although I haven't seen a ton of his films either. But as a star, I'm not interested in him particularly.
Yeah. But here's the thing. In Chori Chori, I mean, Nargis completely steals the show in Chori. It's her movie. I know I have never watched Chori Chori for him. She is spectacular from the get-go. I mean, from the scene where she's in the ship and she's throwing cutlery around and she's throwing food around and she's making a fuss. I think she just lights up the screen. She's adorable. And there's so many shades to her character. Like, she's obviously a petulant, spoiled brat who is very naive, very sheltered, and just thinks that the world revolves around her. But she's also very endearing. And I think there's also a lot of depth to her. There's also, when they shoot that song Rasik Balma on her, when she thinks that Raj Kapoor basically never loved her and he was just like toying around with her, whatever, she's like, your heart really breaks for her. And that's one thing that Dil Hai Ki Manta Nahi doesn't have. With Pooja Bhatt, her performance is so limited that she basically only portrays the petulant, spoiled brat. But there's nothing else about her that's like endearing or wonderful. I do enjoy Amir Khan as Raghu Jaitley very much in that movie, but Pooja Bhatt is just kind of like, okay, fine. But Nargis was insane in this. And the song sequences of the two of them together, especially Aja Sanam Madhur Chandni Mein Hum, crazy. I went crazy just taking like screen grabs and posting them to my Instagram because I was having so much fun. It was just, you can't look away. And I think that's where Nargis had that like undeniable star power.
So how does it fit into her persona for you, for your experience of her and your understanding of her?
I think every single movie I've seen of Nargis, and I also have not seen very many, I've seen kind of basically the usual culprits that you've seen as well. I think what was so special about her was that it was an era when women basically did a lot of weepies. They were always crying and stuff like that. And she always portrayed women who were kind of their own person. She was very individualistic. She often played a rebel, but not in like she wasn't rebellious in like a really annoying petulant way. She was usually it was usually like she portrayed a woman who had a mind of her own, and she was intelligent and she was sassy, but she was also very, very enduring. That's kind of the image I have of Nargis. I've never really seen her play like a complete ditz, I've never seen her play anything very kind of cardboard. I'm sure a lot of the roles that were written for her were cardboardy, but she definitely endowed them with a lot of life. So I always think of Nargis as like a very relatable person. Like if there's a 1956 actress I want to be friends with today and, just go out for girls' night and have a bunch of mojitos with, I would go with Nargis and also Wahida Rehman. Like those were two women that I would love to be friends with even today. Not so much Meena Kumari. No.
Probably not.
Meena Kumari and I would probably be in the bathroom, like crying and like holding each other's hair back and stuff.
Poor thing.
No.
Have you seen Unhoni?
I have not.
So I was reading about this morning. She only did 2 double roles, and that's one of them. And then the other one is in her last film. And I was reading someone's PhD thesis actually, where they're talking about how the double role really helped cement different things about her public persona and how it was able to sort of reconcile tensions, because of course she plays both the good and the bad and the upright and the dancing girl and whatever else. So that is one I can't find that one with subtitles either, but I'll probably give it a try anyway, because I mean double roles are always fascinating, but that one sounds particularly interesting. That is with Raj Kapoor, also not directed by him obviously, but that sounds really interesting.
Well, how did you feel about Taqdeer? I've never seen this movie, by the way.
Okay, you guys, this movie, I am kind of surprised I've never heard of it, or at least if I have, I don't recall. And I don't think I've really read anybody talking about it, although again, I'm sure people have. So this is from 1943. It is pre-partition, which I bring up because the film opens with theater performances at the Kumbh Mela.
Okay.
This may well be the first movie to have children lost at the fair.
Oh!
I don't know that it is. There have been 30 years worth of films in India at this point, so probably someone's already done it, but this is children lost at the fair in 1943. 2 children are lost at the fair. There's a theater troupe that's performing and talking about, we love India and all this kind of stuff. There's a song every 2 seconds in this movie. I can't name you a movie that's more jam-packed with songs. It's like a little bit of plot, song, and the songs do relate to the plot. I'm not saying that, but it's like speaking, song. Like there's so many songs. So the 2 children get lost at the fair. Nargis, who is not played by her yet, is one of the children, and she is actually the daughter of a judge and his wife. Then the theater troupe owner, his son is lost at the fair, and they get switched. So the theater managers help. The theater guy's manager finds this little girl and is like, well, your son's lost. I can't find him, but here's this girl. And so they train her up to be Nargis, the amazing performer. She's 14 in this movie. And oh my God, there are times where she looks at the little boy who actually is from the theater family. So the judge's wife had a mental breakdown over them losing their daughter. And the doctor's like, you just need to find a kid, any kid, and swap the kid in. And someone finds this little boy. Now, are you noticing that this is a boy and a girl who have been swapped? So the judge's wife is so excited to see this child, even as he grows up and is played by Motilal, a man, refers to him as her daughter.
What?
And it's like talking about, my daughter doesn't wear saris, but it's okay. Yeah. So we need the queer scholars to get in here and do this film, because it is wild. I've seen a lot of children lost at fairs. I've seen a lot of families separated. I have never seen a member of a family full on refuse to recognize the gender of the child. It is wild. And of course, they fall in love. And the judge, I know. And the judge is like, no, you can't marry an actress. She may come from a perfectly respectable family, but her job is not respectable. And obviously that's nice meta commentary on Nargis's actual life.
Right.
And then there's other stuff that happens. And of course it all gets sorted out in the end, but there are all these scenes of like Nargis talking to the very mentally unstable judge's wife about and calling her mother. It is actually her mother, but nobody knows that. Like it's all just, it's ridiculous. And it's wild. I have never seen anything like this. And the songs, of which, as I said, they're like 47, are really good. Nargis, I think, I'm not sure how she's regarded as a dancer. I've typically liked her in songs very much, or as a performer of songs. There are things in this where she looks very uncertain, and I'm sure it's because she's 14 years old. Yeah. And she appears to be sort of like looking off screen for like not at the camera for direction or something. I think there must be a lot of amateurs in this film, like the theater company. Some of them seem also quite lost and uncertain. But it's still kind of charming anyway. And there's a song, for example, where she is, because she's a theater performer, she gets to, that's a nice way to have all these songs. She is singing about, my husband has been taken by the police. I need to plead his case, and I'm going to give myself to the foreigner in order to get my husband's case brought for you. Like very grown up things. She's 14. I don't know how old she's supposed to be in the film. Like I would say tops 18 probably. Right. And there's a big difference between her and the love interest characters. But anyway, I fully recommend this film. Please watch it. Please talk with me about it on Twitter or in the comments here on YouTube, because I need to know, and especially if you are someone with a lot of knowledge about depictions of queer identities in cinema, like please talk to me about this. I'm not proposing that this film was made as such. It may be, I don't know. But oh boy, in 2022, this comes off as just absolutely amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Please watch it.
That is amazing.
And I thought, again, there's a lot of strong people in this movie, but she's for sure the woman lead. I thought she did a pretty good job. I found her more convincing in dialogue than in songs. Again, that's easy to understand as a child still in this movie. But apparently the film was a big hit, 9th highest grosser of the year in 1943, according to Wikipedia, and really launched her into what she became. And again, the meta commentary on coming from an acting family is really interesting, because one of the things I was reading in these discussions of Nargis's, persona and her history and all, is that there's frequently repeated quotes about how Raj Kapoor kind of gave her class. He also is from an acting family, newsflash, in case you didn't know. But like, that's the difference between men and women, right? Like women can't be actresses and be classy, but men sure can, and they can have enough spare class that they can endow it on the woman.
There's thespians, Beth.
Right.
The men
right. And
the women like dancing girls.
Even at the time where as soon as they split professionally and personally, his films after that are garbage, basically. Yeah. So she's actually the one who made RK Studios what it was, but doesn't, now gets the credit for it.
Even the logo for RK Studios is basically him and her. It's her in that. And I was talking about Chori Chori with my husband the other day, because he was like, oh, you're watching Chori Chori again? Because I've seen this movie so many times. And I was like, yes, there's a reason. This time it's for the podcast. So we were just chatting, and he was like, how many movies have Raj Kapoor and Nargis done together? And I was like, I don't know, but here's the
17.
thing. Wow. But the only Raj Kapoor movies that I enjoy, with the exception of one or two, are the ones with Nargis, because I've seen him in movies with other people and I just don't like him with other people. I suspect it's because I don't particularly like him. I don't particularly enjoy him on screen. So when he's with, for example, I do enjoy Sangam, mostly because I like Vaijayanti Mala a lot. Rajendra Kumar does absolutely nothing for me. He has the charisma of a wooden dining table. And Raj Kapoor is also terrible in Sangam. I basically watched that movie for Vaijayanti Mala and for the songs, but like, I don't like Raj Kapoor with Vaijayanti Mala. I've seen Fir Subha Hogi. I don't really like him with, I think it's Mala Sinha in that movie. I mean, I've seen Teesri Kasam. I love Wahida Rahman, but he's kind of decent-ish in it. It's like when he's with Nargis, he completely lights up. But here's the thing, Nargis is good with everyone though. But he's not good with everyone. So I suspect that a large part of this like hit pairing or whatever that they had was mostly her contribution, because you can't take your eyes off of her. She has like so much screen presence and charisma, and he has some, but he doesn't have that chemistry with everybody.
One of the things I read this morning that was so interesting to me was talking about, I'm sure everyone listening to us knows the story of, on the set of Mother India, Sunil Dutt saves her from, the fire. So literally she went through a cleansing fire that separated her from the Raj Kapoor era of her, again, professional and personal life, and that she moves ahead with Sunil Dutt. And, she has these distinct eras. I mean, that was fascinating to think about that, and people are projecting, the public is projecting so much hope, anxiety, all these things onto her, what they see of her on the screen, and then what they read about her in gossip in columns or see of her in public appearances and all. So she really, a lot of celebrities do this, but she is, and it's such an interesting time, right? She's bridging partition. She's independent New India, modern.
She had all these kind of like all these hats she wore. Basically, she was, Nargis, the actress that you associate with RK Studios. Then she was Nargis, who sort of came into her own, especially with Mother India. Then you associate her with like the Sunil Dutt era, where she kind of became like a wife and a mom and those things. Then you associate her with politics. Then you associate her even with cancer. I mean, Mumbai, which is the city that I'm from, there's so many references to Nargis here and there, like, with cancer memorials and stuff like that. And then Sunil Dutt also made that movie Dard Ka Rishta, which I've actually seen. It's an interesting movie. It's very earnest, I'll give it that. And he made that on sort of the subject of cancer. So she's also kind of like the face of kind of like cancer survival and stuff like that in India. So there's all these like different things that you associate her with. But I think she always like came across as this incredibly classy person. And I adore Sunil Dutt. I have such a soft spot for him. Yeah. So like I mean, the diehard romantic in me loves this whole story of him rescuing her at this fire in Mother India.
It's ridiculously filmy. How can we not love it? Yeah.
Apparently their romance bloomed in the hospital, because he was in the hospital with like injuries and stuff, and she would go over there with like home cooked food and like basically like to be like thankful to him. And I'm like, their romance bloomed in the hospital. So I just think it's adorable. It's really cute.
And yet in that film, my favorite thing about Mother India, which I will never watch again because it is such an effort, is that she shoots him dead.
I love it.
And it's magical. Like, that is such a fantastic moment. And for me, I didn't, we use the term Mother India to connote certain things. That was not part of my concept of what the term Mother India meant. So for that to be one of the major moments of that film, I was like, this is spectacular.
Yeah, I love that moment.
Like, we don't talk about that moment enough.
So this is funny, or maybe obnoxious, probably both. So when I was a teenager and I was going through this like extremely rebellious emo phase, I would ask this question of all the adults in my family, my grandparents, my parents, my aunts and uncles. And I would say, in Mother India, she forces her son to pay for his crimes, and like there's consequences, and she shoots him dead. And they're like, yeah, because they know it's a landmine. And I'm like, if I did something bad, would you shoot me? This was actually a question I asked. And my mother was like, I wouldn't shoot you because that's not something I do, but I would cart you off to the police station and hand you over. And I'm like, what? You clearly don't love me. So my takeaway from Mother India was that if you shoot your child, you don't love them. So it clearly, like, it failed to land. Mehboob Khan didn't do a good enough job.
I don't think Mehboob Khan makes films for teenagers.
No.
That's my hot take for today, kids. From the 50s. He's more for grown-ups.
Yes, he is more
very
for grown-ups.
earnest grown-ups.
very, very earnest, very serious, kind of emo grown-ups too, actually.
Emo
Also
communist grown-ups.
very, I was just gonna say, like, those who are very like Marxist, like, that's it's for them. It's for them that he makes these movies.
In which, to be clear, I am all for. Like, we need more of
yes,
that, probably.
I'm very much a pinker myself. I have a pink wall as well, so that works for me. But yeah, so of that era, I would say, like, of the old-timey people that we're going to talk about, who would you say is your favorite? Because mine it's definitely tied between Nargis and Wahida Rehman for me.
I like all of them that I've seen. I have not seen a ton of movies from before about 1965, not on purpose. It's just sort of happened. And we should say, like, we could have started our Superstar series with Devika Rani and gone further back, but it's so much harder to get those films, and especially for subtitle users. So that's why we started where we did.
Also, those movies are slow, Beth.
That's okay. I mean, I can handle slow.
There's not enough tea in the world for me to be able to watch them. I can't.
Honestly, my favorite 50 superstar is Suchitra Sen.
Oh, okay.
Because everything, and I like the Hindi leading women that I've seen too, the Hindi film leading women a lot, especially Wahida Rehman, I would say. And I absolutely 100% understand why everyone loves Madhubala. For sure. Yeah. I get it. But for me, it's Suchitra Sen. And it is partly because I've seen more of her films, but I find her just phenomenally fiery, compelling. I love what she does in films. A lot of what you were talking about with the sort of Nargis persona of the types of roles, I see that in her too. Obviously, the context is a little different, and I haven't seen as many of her. I've seen a few of her Hindi films. But obviously she's a Bengali superstar, the Bengali woman superstar for all time. And I just adore her. So maybe, I don't know if we'll consider her for our series or not, because we are not necessarily limiting ourselves to Hindi, but that's what you and I mostly know, although both of us dabble in Bengali as well. So that's handy. But I love all these women, and I love a lot of what they're surrounded by. I love some of the ideas that are in the films that I've seen. And they are every bit as compelling as the men that they're opposite, which is not, that's not always true. It's not always even in films, right? And in the so, and for me, a lot of the 60s men stars I'm not as interested in as I am the women stars.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But in the 50s, I feel like you've got some phenomenal pairings. Obviously, the super famous ones, like we've been talking about, but you can put all sorts of people together, and they're phenomenal. So yeah, I look forward to the next. I mean, all of these are going to be really interesting.
What's also interesting is, I mean, it's possible that I'm very much cherry picking, but I feel like so many of the movies, like from the 50s and the 60s, with all of these like old timey stars, really hold up even now, and they don't infuriate me as a woman. But there's so many movies that are coming up even now in 2022 that I'm like, what is this rubbish? And I just like switch it off, and I'm like, I cannot take this anymore. Like, it just raises my blood pressure, because the actresses have absolutely nothing to do. Their role is wafer thin. I mean, their character is wafer thin. It's like a cardboard thing. And there's just so much casual misogyny in some of the films. I'm sure there was a lot of casual misogyny in like the 50s and the 60s movies as well. But so many of the roles that I've seen that, Wahida Rehman and Nargis and Meena Kumari to some extent, and all of these people did, we're just so much better. Like, I can watch Chori Chori 100 times and it doesn't infuriate me, but there's movies coming out today that I'm just like, no, please go away.
Yeah, that whole thing about could the woman be replaced with a sexy lamp? We were speaking the other day, I forget if we were recording or not, about Bulbulaya 2.
Yes.
That's kind of a sexy lamp movie for Chiara. But
it is.
Nargis is never going to be a sexy lamp.
No.
No one would have offered her that, I think, or if they did, she would have probably laughed them out of the studio, and it wouldn't have happened. And I admire her greatly for that. And I mean, was there a lot of casual misogyny not on camera? Oh, I'm sure. But what we get presented with on screen feels very substantial, and feels very interesting as text, looking back to thinking about like what's happening in India at this time. What does cinema mean to people at this time? What are the, these I say hopes and dreams not lightly, like an ancient nation, but a new nation, like, that's fascinating. So the films from then, and as we move into things into the 60s, like Lucht, which we've talked about a little bit already, like, Lost and Found and how that represents partition and all these things. Like, this is super juicy and I love this stuff.
It's super juicy. I mean, on the other hand, can you imagine reviewing something like that movie that just came out, Liger, that has Vijay Deverakonda and Ananya Pandey? I watched the trailer and I wanted to shoot myself. I was like,
that is not a movie I'm going to watch.
You're not. No, we don't. And the good thing is, this is our podcast, so we decide what we want to do, so we don't have to watch it. Yay! Win-win. Okay, so that was it for this episode, the first of many episodes that will be about female megastars. I think maybe the next episode is not going to be on this topic. Right. Do we know what we're talking about next week? I think we do.
Do you tease it for us?
Okay. We all know and love Jane Austen. Yes. We know that Jane Austen's movies have been made into Indian adaptations at least thrice. So we are going to have a very, very dear filmy lady friend with us. And each of us is going to talk about an Indian adaptation of a Jane Austen book. And I will not tell you what those are. I will tell you what the books are. The books are Emma, Sense and Sensibility, and Pride and Prejudice. And we will discuss the Indian movies that were made on those books. So we are very excited, and we will have a wonderful guest on to discuss those movies with us. Yay!
I also love that we're getting 3 different languages. So we have a Hindi film, but then 2 others in not Hindi. So that's really interesting too. And one of these films plays a very important role in my life, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Ooh, I know. Either, so I'm excited to hear about that.
So make sure you don't miss the next episode by subscribing to this here YouTube channel and or Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. We are Filmi Ladies in all of those places. So please, please, please subscribe and share us out with your filmy loving friends, whether ladies or not. We welcome all stripes of people to this podcast. Tell us what you think about Nargis, because, I in particular have a lot to learn about a lot of these older generations of actors. And I would love to know what people think and what recommendations you have, especially if it's like, I actually love this one that nobody ever talks about. Tell us, because there are so many good movies I haven't seen yet and I need to know about them. So subscribe, comment, talk to us all about what you love about Nargis.
Also, you guys, one of the reasons we made this podcast was because Beth and I love movies. We're such movie nerds, and we also want to talk about stuff that matters to women. But there's such a dearth of people we can talk about this stuff with. That's why we made this podcast. So if you are also a film nerd and you want to talk about stuff and you have like raging, burning issues you want to get off your chest, then this is a perfect opportunity for you to enter into a conversation with us, because that's really what we're looking for. So please comment.
Do you think Raj Kapoor is a disgusting lech? Tell us. I think there's a strong argument to be made there.
All right. Well, thank you for watching Filmi Ladies. Bye, guys.
Bye.